Welcome to the Scaling Creative Podcast. Welcome back, I should say,
because we are here.
We are here.
It's been a busy couple weeks.
It has.
But we're good. We're excited to be back.
Are you excited to be back,
I'm
though?
pumped.
Because you were in San Diego, so.
Well, that's true. I'm excited to be back on the podcast. I'm not excited to be back in Pennsylvania. The Philly airport, it doesn't get worse than that. Seriously. It's the worst airport in the United States.
But I don't know about that.
Oh, I promise you. I think I've realized as I've traveled, the Northeast is just really unfriendly.
It is.
Yeah.
Like, I've already known that, but every time you go anywhere else, you're like, why are these people smiling at me? Like, is there something wrong? You just forget how terribly miserable people on the East Coast are.
Yeah.
Northeast, I should say, not East Coast, Northeast.
That's
Just
true.
So yeah, we're looking at a new San Diego office location.
Yes, please.
Just
I'm
kidding.
ready.
One day.
That or Nashville.
Yeah. Yeah, you said that very Southern, like you were from there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it sounded
You
very
know,
Nashville.
when I speak,
Nashville.
people always tell me that I sound Southern when I'm speaking. It's very weird. So I become this Southern belle.
Southern Belle.
What a great note
Pablo
to start
got
the
to
podcast
travel
here.
to Chicago with
Oh,
me.
yeah.
We had a good time. It was
Yeah.
good.
I did. It was good. Chicago. First time ever.
We had some authentic Chicago
Did
Panda
you?
Express.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was very.
Yeah.
It's like when you go to Chicago, that's where you should go. It's Panda
Right.
Express.
Panda Express.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
noted.
The orange chicken there, most specifically, is unbelievable.
Well, yeah, so we are excited to be back on the podcast. And
Yes.
actually, our topic today is all about podcasting. And so we're going to focus on some of the benefits and the reasons why businesses should have podcasts, and then also maybe why you shouldn't. So I'm going to start off with just the first thing, as I was doing my research and everything. But so the first thing, one of the benefits of having a podcast for your business and fueling your business is traffic generation and attraction. So it will really help you reach a wider audience and push more users to either your website or your services in a very non-salesy way. And I know we talk about this often, is you don't have to have a call to action or be selling something on the podcast. It's really an opportunity for you to educate your either current clients or potential clients and consumers. And the thing is, way more people consume audio as opposed to print or, reading something. I'm way more likely to listen to a podcast than I am to read a blog.
Yeah, I was going to say, before we even jump in, one of the reasons I think podcasts are becoming popular again is because time is everyone's crazy, most valuable asset. And podcasts are the only form of content that you can do something else while you're listening to it.
Yeah. Yep.
So unlike videos that you have to watch or books that you have to sit there, you can't, drive and read.
Right.
You can't, we do on my phone all the time.
Yeah.
But it's the only thing that you can do something else too. And I think people are starting to realize that there are so many useful and good podcasts that are valuable.
Yep.
That when you can get value in your life added while you still keep your life going, it's awesome.
Yeah,
and I think that's
absolutely.
why people really like them. And because they were really popular for a long time. Then they stopped being really popular, and now they're becoming really popular again. So it's
I wonder why it stopped.
I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I think maybe there weren't as many people doing it at the time, and maybe I don't really know. But it definitely now it's the thing everyone's talking about.
I think it's so easily accessible. Whereas I remember when some of the people that I followed started podcasting, it was harder to I can't remember exactly how it was, but you had to either.
Well, you had to download it to your iPod at the time. Yes. So you have to get to your computer to download it and then transfer the podcast to it. So yeah, that was a big thing at the beginning why a lot of people didn't do it.
Yeah, and for me, if there's a lot of steps.
Yeah. And it's just, it was a nuisance. And then now it's so accessible that if I tell you about a podcast, you instantly can hit a button, subscribe, and start listening. And it's awesome.
Yeah. And we're actually going to talk about, that's one of the biggest benefits is the use of time also for the business side of things. But we're going to definitely dive a little bit more into that. But don't you think that even just for us and doing a podcast, it's really more so about education, but we've gotten business from it in a very authentic, organic kind of way. And because we've had people that reach out to us and say, oh, we listen to the podcast or watch the podcast, or so And that it just feels good when you don't have to sell.
Well, I think the reason people, and we'll probably get into this, but the reason I think it can bring you business is because it allows you to go deeper into topics that you know. Mm-hmm. And if people realize that you actually know something, they're more likely to like pay for your services. Yep. Because I think you can only do so much on a video. You can only do so much on a random one-off blog post. But when you have 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes deep dive into discussion, and there's tons of things that people have never heard about and they're learning, it clearly allows people to see that you have experience in what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. And it allows you to like repurpose content. So if your company has already written blog posts or LinkedIn articles or whatever it might be, you can repurpose all of that, make it into a podcast, and then take the podcast and pull micro pieces from there. So whether it's like audio clips or short videos or quotes, there's so much that you can take from a podcast.
Yeah, and we choose to obviously do a video aspect of our podcast with it just so we can pull like content from it, but you don't have to do video either. And you also don't have to, necessarily go through as much work as we do a lot of times for the video, but we're a video production company, so it makes a little bit more sense. But you don't have to. Podcasting by itself is powerful. I think just because of the day and age with YouTube and everything now, there's benefits of having a video aspect because when you do want to share a good nugget, it's not easy to share just an audio file on YouTube without it being really boring because it's just different. Yep. So having those different little pieces allow, and I think more people listen to our podcast or watch it on YouTube than anything. Because I think there's just this personal connection of feeling like you're kind of sitting down at the table.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that holds people back and businesses back from starting a podcast is the how. So, because we do it in a way, again, like we're in video production. So there's a level that we kind of hold ourselves to, but not everybody has to be like that. Do you have any recommendations for people maybe starting smaller?
I think people are also held back more than anything, though, on like, number one, I think they get crippled in what's this going to do for us?
Yep.
In the first episode.
Yeah.
Like, what business are we going to get? And then they're crippled by like, okay, well, what will we talk about? And then the how, I don't even think comes first, honestly. I think it's easy to record one these days. I think the people struggle. Same reason people struggle to create video content. It's not that they don't have a phone to even record it on. It's that they always say to themselves, what should I talk about? Where if you're a business, and granted, if you're like a one-person shop, there's only necessarily so much that you might be able to talk about at the beginning because you only have necessarily so many skill sets. But if you're a large company, you should have so much to talk about because if you involve other people, because there are people that know their little section of what they do. They're on that company for something. So they should talk about something in marketing if they're doing marketing, and someone should talk about engineering if they're the engineer. Yep. So you definitely can't be crippled by that. And then if you're a large company, the how should be pretty easy. Buy a few pieces of gear if you want to do it decently and just get started. No one really listens in the beginning anyway, so you don't have to overstress how good it even sounds.
What are some of the podcasts that you guys listen to? Do you listen to any like on the regular, Pablo?
I do, yeah. I listen to Gary V's podcast. I think it's called Daily V is the proper name of it. I think it's called
Gary V Audio Experience.
Right, yes.
Yeah, Daily V is the YouTube.
The YouTube, right. I mixed the names up. But yes, I listen to a lot of Gary V. I do listen to a lot of different like just pastors and sermons. I also listened to, recently Jenny turned me on to this one about like Enneagram and like personality types and just like, I also have a couple business ones that I listen to that I'm forgetting the names of right now, but we can put them in the description or whatever. But either way, I do listen to a lot of them because that's, like we've talked about, it's something that I don't have a lot of time to always just sit and watch. And so that's something that's super powerful about podcasting, which we already talked about. But I take a lot of time just like either when I'm driving or maybe like when I'm in the middle of doing something like at home, trying to like clean up or whatever, I'll throw like AirPods in and listen to a podcast all the time. So it's something that I find to be powerful, but I think it's true that a lot of people just tend to not believe in themselves enough and in what they're doing even. And I think that it really, all you have to do is just start a conversation and the cost of entry doesn't have to be insane. If you have a phone, you can record a podcast. And so I think that that's just important that I wanted to mention from earlier. But as far as listening to podcasts, yeah, I listen to podcasts literally all the time.
Yeah. What about you?
Definitely Gary V's. Gary V's is really, really good because there's like 10 a day
Right.
His are very different than like an episode
Yeah.
one by one. It could be a small nugget
Yep.
from something, which is a great example too of his are not polished audio. Like if you're talking about it from a production level, some of them sound terrible because it just was, you know, a random mic that captures something, but it's about the content that's inside it, which is like he's a great example of don't overlook anything. He's got a huge team that produces all the content, but like the quality is not through the roof. It's the content that's actually on it that's through the roof. Now he's unique because obviously he could put it out on any quality and people would listen to it. So I don't suggest that you create a podcast without good audio quality. But so Gary Vee, I really, really like. I really like the one that we just started listening to with that Michael Hyatt guy, whatever that. What's the podcast called? Lead to Win.
I think so.
Lead to Win.
Lead to
that
Win.
one I really like. I'm a huge fan of Matt D'Avella in like the filmmaker realm. He's a guy that produced the documentary Minimalists on Netflix.
Yes,
but his are outstanding.
He has a lot of great guests.
Great guests, and he's just a good interviewer. I think he's just I think his stuff, and he's just got such a soothing voice. He's got like it's just like so calm.
Yeah,
I like that one a lot. I really like Chase Jarvis, has some good stuff. There's some church like sermon ones. They're kind of all over the map. Like that's. But I probably listen a couple hours a week minimum. I don't listen to everything that comes out from everybody, but I definitely like to try.
Do you read blogs?
Not at all.
I'll
read like random small little things that people post on LinkedIn if they're like a 3. Yeah. But the way I read is if it's like 3 tips to grow your business, I look at the bold number 1, number 2, number 3, and then
the first couple sentences.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's the extent of it. Yeah. But then if that same podcast comes and it's 25 minutes long and it's 3 tips to boost your business, I can listen to the whole 25-minute thing.
Yeah.
It's just so different.
That's actually my next point is it's just a great use of your time, both as a business and then also as a consumer. So podcasting is like, let's say, for example, if 200 people listen to this, it's almost as if you're having coffee with 200 people.
Yeah.
So because it feels more intimate, I think, you know, like I love listening to the podcast that I listen to. It just feels like I have a friendship with these people.
Yeah.
And so what that does for your clients and your consumers is it builds a level of trust, and you're more likely to do business with someone who you trust and who you have a relationship with. Even though you might not know them, they feel like they know you because podcasting is just a little bit more of an intimate
because it's
setting.
long. It's long.
I was going to.
form.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
It doesn't always have to be. Like
No.
we might touch on that. Like it doesn't have to be 50 minutes long or an hour. But
Right.
that's why podcasts I think are actually as good as they are. Is
Yes.
it allows you. You know, I'll post a 7-minute video on YouTube, but I could talk about that for an hour if I really wanted to.
Yeah.
And the podcast really is like your most devoted people
Yes.
more than anything. Because if they are interested in hearing you talk even more than you did in a short form, it's the ones that actually will get you, I hate using ROI, but the most, because they're the ones that are actually saying, you're interesting enough that I want to hear you even more.
Yep.
Yeah, I think podcasting is amazing just because it's the one form of content that it's not weird.
Yeah.
Like to have a 45-minute conversation or a 50-minute conversation. Like I think, you know, nobody has time to sit down for an hour and watch a video or read a blog or whatever. You know, I'm the kind of person I'd fall asleep while I'm reading. So I think for listening, it's because it's so long, you can get so personal, and because it's so personal, you can connect with your audience better. So I think it's just an amazing form of content.
Exactly. You have their attention for a much longer period of time. And there's something I think that's almost magical about the voice. Like when people hear your voice and they're accustomed to your voice and learning from you, like they're just naturally going to go to you for whatever it is that you're offering.
But it's like
business
it's like welcomed though, you know, because if you put up like a 7-minute podcast, people be like, that was weird. Like that was real short. Like
These
it's
days
almost
it is different.
Right.
And going back to kind of how to record a podcast, I do think it's important when we're talking about like a production quality. If you are podcasting, it is important to at least try to get it to sound as good as possible.
Yes.
People don't realize how important sound is. Even in a podcast, that sound is the only thing most times. It should sound good when people are listening to, because there are random things that come from like Gary Vee or different people that are very raw for a purpose. It's his style of things. The successful podcasts in the world, beyond just that they obviously have great content, they sound good.
Yep.
you definitely, but it's not, the cost to entry is not that much for just good audio. I mean, it's, like anything, it's cheaper than video as a start. So at least having a starting point of getting a couple of microphones that are good for it is a huge, huge thing.
Do you have a recommendation?
We can put some in the links for sure of some things for people to check out, like kind of
you have a fancy
more
one.
basic. Yeah, and like we said, we're different. Like we're different because we do this professionally, so it'd be kind of laughable if we like paid no attention to the things that we actually sell to people.
Right.
So, but you don't have to have this microphone and the preamps that we're going in and all that. People are like, what is a preamp? You don't have to have the stuff that we use to do it. There's more basic ways to do it. You have a more basic setup for your own podcast. It still works great. It's just right in a computer. But it's not a bad idea to invest a little money and maybe a little training from somebody just to at least get you started. Because the great thing about audio is like once you get the sound, you can repeat it once every time. So it's not that hard to do. Where it's harder in video, you have lighting to worry about, you have audio, you have framing, the audio. You could literally sit in your closet with a microphone by yourself, get great audio, and have a great sounding podcast very cheaply.
Yeah,
but I do think it's important to just, at least just mention that it's if you're going to take it seriously, think about investing a little bit of money into it because if you only have people listening and you talk for an hour and it sounds terrible, they won't listen an hour.
Yeah. But Mary and I had recorded like one of our very first podcasts, and I had a nicer mic, and she just used the one on her computer. And afterwards, she like sent me a clip, and I'm like, we can't use this. You sound horrible. And I sound crispy, so.
Welcome,
hey,
welcome to the world of crispy. Of being around people that care about audio.
I think, didn't I box you or something? I'm like, you ruined me.
I cannot even listen to things anymore. But honestly, you don't even have a lot of experience, but you would notice that audio, even before, the average person doesn't realize that what they're listening to sound like they realize they don't like listening to it. They don't necessarily know like, oh, it's just bad audio.
Right.
It's there's a whole different thing. Like it's just another whole topic.
But the only thing is like, because I know for me, like before I started working here and everything, like I didn't really know what good audio was or bad audio was. I kind of just internally, but you don't really know. And so like I think I just don't want people to be like discouraged to like not do a podcast just because they're like, oh well, I don't know how to arrive at what Scott's talking about. So like. Not starting is definitely not the thing, but being open to learning and working on it so that eventually, yes, if you take it seriously, it's worth the investment and the time and learning.
Because it's just easy with podcasts, like I said, to get somebody one time to come in for 1 hour to set you up your setup each week, and it's done. It's not like video where lighting plays a factor. It's literally like I set up a microphone, I set up your preferences, and it's like, okay, we're done. Now just hit record every time you're going to do it.
That's it.
Yeah.
So it's a great avenue to get in to create content very, very inexpensively.
Absolutely.
So I think the other part about that point of it's a great use of your time can be tricky for companies because if you're a person that wants to start a podcast that really understands the power of it, you may think it's a great use of your time. Convincing the people that actually let you use your time for that is another whole story.
It's true.
Podcasting is an amazing use of your time and an amazing thing that every business in the world should do. Most companies that don't know any of that, even large companies, the idea of you starting a podcast, their response is going to be, what's the ROI on it? And after 2 episodes, when you say you only have 13 people to listen to it, they're going to kill your podcast quick.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the hardest parts is you have to really get people to understand. It's something that we deal with all the time with companies, getting people to understand podcasting is not something immediately that you are going to get an ROI on at all. Long term, it absolutely can in a huge way. But it's going to be the rare thing that if you start selling on your podcast, you're done. Like, you're done. It, probably ever. People don't even like when you randomly hear ad breaks from the person. Like, okay, well, we need to pay our bills.
I just fast forward through those.
So when you fast forward, their ROI goes down. So as a company, if you're the person paying the bills of the person that's sitting behind a microphone to record a podcast and then edit a podcast, and 4 hours a week is going to a podcast that gets you no money back, you better have them understanding what you're really trying to do with it in the long term.
Yeah.
So I think that is a tricky thing because you may get people to listen to this or other things that feel like, you know what, 100% agree. I want to do a podcast. But if you're not the boss, you need to do some convincing. So hopefully some of these things that we're going to talk about help you have some leverage points of why we do think it's a good use of your time.
Yep.
But I think that at the beginning, it's really important to realize that we know that this is not just as easy as, yes, tomorrow I'm going to start a podcast.
Yeah.
And I can use 20% of my work week to do it. If you're in that situation, awesome. And you definitely should start one.
Yeah.
If not, try to use some of these points of leverage of why we do think it is a good use of your time.
Yeah, and do research. Like there's a lot of statistics out there too, as far as like the number of people that are listening to podcasts like on a daily basis, and the fact that audio is just the way that our world is going. I mean, think about, her, Alexa.
Alexa.
Yeah.
Yes. If we start
Siri.
talking, she'll start listening.
Not too loud. Not too loud.
All these things, but it's going. Our world is going toward audio, and if your company is not going in that direction, it's going backwards.
And that is absolutely going to be probably the next podcast we talked about, an audio world that we're going in, because my goodness, could we dive into that?
Oh boy.
Oh yeah.
And people don't even realize where we're going.
They don't even realize
it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that is the next episode of the podcast, people. Get ready to wait for it.
Little disclaimer there.
Any other things about being a good use of your time?
No, I think it
Nothing's
goes hand in hand with the next point for sure.
Exactly.
Of why it's one of the best uses for your time.
Yes. So
Take it away, Michaela.
point number 3
Come on down.
It is a new, the new kind of networking. So this has been a lot of fun for us too, because a lot of podcasts, especially if you're like a one-person show, is bringing guests onto your podcast. And so not only is it fun, but when you have guests, you get to know them on a deeper level. Honestly, a lot of the work is on them too, as far as, talking wise and providing content, but you're featuring them and you're getting to know them, and there's going to be something within that as far as networking goes. But
yeah,
I know you were really
excited. If the conversation is good with somebody, and they like you build a deeper connection. But the reason it's such a cool way to network is it's really easy to get someone on a podcast with you from an audio only perspective.
Oh yeah.
Because it doesn't take them that much time, and especially if there's someone that has a podcast already or does this at all. It is so simple to take 30 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever, let them talk about what they love, give you an audio file, and you're done.
Yep.
It's really hard for me to try to say, can you come to this area? We're going to film this. We're going to set this up, and I got to check all the lighting. You're not going to get people. But I found it surprising just how easy it is to reach out to people, and they're instantly like, sure, let me know what time. And you're like, really, that's it? Because it's just less time. But it's a great way to network if you're a good interviewer, and more importantly, if you don't look like you're trying to take advantage of them. Absolutely. Because that's the thing I think people do wrong a lot is they get people, they bring on someone that they're super excited to do it, but the conversation ends up being all value for them, not value for their listeners, A. And then B, they expect that this person with tons of followers should tweet every little detail about their podcast, and that don't use people.
Right.
You're already get some additional views by having a good person listen, but you should never ever expect someone to share it on their social media, or more importantly, ask them to share it on their social media. They do this a lot.
Right.
And as soon as they do that, you already lose the hopeful friendship you had, because you should hope they just got done talking with you and almost just this is a really nice guy.
Yeah.
That was a fun conversation.
Yep.
And there was no sales pitch.
Right.
There was no, hey, if you ever looking for video, it shouldn't be. It should be about your listeners to understand what they find value in. So you bring guests on that have insight on that, and that's it.
Yeah.
And it's not a selfish conversation of you asking all the questions you want answered.
Right.
Because the other thing is they'll share it out if they felt like the conversation was actually good.
Yes. Yeah.
They won't share it if they felt like this guy was just playing me so he could get more listens.
Yep.
But it's a great way to network because you get people.
Yeah.
And when you're a one-man shop and you can't think of what to talk about, but you suddenly decide, I want to talk about leadership. Well, go to a local business that's doing well and ask them to do other podcasts. They're going to be thrilled. And then go to the next business and do one on owning a restaurant, and then do another one. And now you're becoming the go-to podcast in your area, building like good relationships with all these business owners without ever having to drop off a business card asking them for business.
Yep, that's exactly that was one of my points, is just building relationships. Again, in a natural, organic way where you're focused on them. And I think if you ever have somebody on your podcast that is on podcasts, listen to those ones that they've been on, because I think it's just cool to ask unique questions and really, really value that relationship over, like what you were saying, getting something from them, or
it's a great way to get yourself out of the way, just because like if you're constantly the one talking, it's okay, like you might be very good at podcasting, but it's just a nice way to get yourself out of the way and get an expert in the way of like what you're talking about, and get a different perspective and a different voice. It's just like, it's nice to have in that conversation, especially if you're by yourself. But even if you're in a group, like we've had it's like a couple guests on our podcast as well, and we have multiple people that are asking multiple questions, and but it's obviously nice to showcase somebody that is really good at what they do. And it not only helps you, but it also helps them, because it's just nice to hear someone talk about something that they know about, like something that they know about. It's nice.
And then you're not trying to find the topics all the time.
Right.
Exactly.
Or you're not trying to claim that you're the expert in every space, because you don't know everything. Like we don't know everything either. We know topics of things, but if we have a topic that we feel like someone really is dominant in, it'd be silly for us to not let them talk about it.
Absolutely, yeah. But we all love to learn. And so I think when you have guests on, like you're going to learn something new. And that's a lot of people who are listening to podcasts, like they're there to learn, to be educated. So if you can feature somebody who is going to educate on a level that you can't, like you're providing value for the listener, and you're also providing value just for the person talking, because it's a good ego boost too, just because people love to talk about what they're good at.
I think it's special too, because obviously, like we've said, you make a friend out of it too, if it's not a sales pitch, or if there's no strings attached, and you're genuinely just caring about asking them great questions. And Scott's touched on this before, but podcasting is such a special thing, because it's like you legitimately have, like, nobody's checking phones right now. We're drinking coffee and we're just having a conversation. It's like even when you have coffee with somebody, you might be checking your phone, like, you know what I mean? Like your distractions or whatever. And I feel like podcasting is, you're saying, like, where literally everything else in the world is shut off. Except this conversation. And so if you can do that with someone that you don't even know, but that they're an expert in it,
it's refreshing.
You can make like crazy
Maybe that's why people do such long podcasts.
Maybe.
Because it's the only peace and quiet you get.
They want to get away.
Everyone's phone's on do not disturb.
It's so true.
There's no email that I need to respond to. This is amazing.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy.
It's a special time.
I hate email.
It's like we're on a plane.
Also, I mean, this is almost back to one of the last points, but I tend to listen to really long podcasts every Tuesday I do laundry.
Nice.
It's like my thing on Tuesday, and that's when I listen to my really long podcasts. I mean, Tim Ferriss had a phenomenal podcast the other week. It was almost 2 hours long. It was like just under 2 hours.
There are some people that do. Like Joe Rogan does like 3.5 hour episodes, 4 hour episodes, like crazy.
It's so crazy.
Yeah, but that's the cool thing, is the people that listen to him love it.
Yeah.
Like he wouldn't do it 4 hours if he saw that nobody would stop listening. Everyone would stop listening at a certain amount of time. But it's...
You have to have a name, though, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, to do it that long, or a real reason it's that long.
Right.
Because no doubt about it, don't create a 1 hour podcast if it could be 15 minutes and way better. Like, don't create it long and make the time go on and on just so people are like, ooh, another hour long one.
Yeah.
If they're listening for an hour, respect people's time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because not everyone listens to it to the end regardless, but more importantly, think about how you can make it the most valuable in the shortest amount of time is great.
Yeah.
But I'm convinced that people overthink how long things should be, because like on YouTube, people are, oh, you should make the shortest things possible, but the biggest views I have are hour and a half long videos. Yeah. It's about what you're talking about.
It's about the content.
The content always wins.
Yeah.
So the time, that's why literally we don't keep this podcast to we're trying to make it 60 minutes or 45. The conversation ends when the conversation ends.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Like if we feel like there's nothing else to talk about, sometimes we just wrap it up. It is what it is.
Yeah, so those are my 3 like main points that I felt like just how podcasts can fuel your business. So traffic generation and attraction without selling.
A great point to think about also, because we talked earlier about like what even should the podcast be about. A great technique, I think, for people too is don't make the podcast all about only what you do.
Yeah.
Meaning, if you are an IT company, don't do an IT podcast because it's just going to be a bunch of IT people that listen to it, which probably aren't your target market.
Yes.
Make it about stuff that isn't even necessarily what your company does and have guests on to just make you the go-to podcast. And it just so turns out that the IT company is the one that does the podcast.
Yeah.
Because there are some niches that would be a really boring podcast except for the people that do that same thing. But you don't want, if you're actually looking to long-term get business, getting just really techie engineer people to listen to an engineer podcast might not necessarily do the same thing.
Right.
So thinking outside the box with your videos is the same thing, but how can you create a podcast that you host just because you like doing it, but it has nothing to do. We have a client that does these all the time, these monthly in-person events at their place, and they're never about what they do.
Yeah.
They're about leadership. They're about social media, different things. And it's, I think, awesome.
Yeah.
Because it's never about their service. So it's so not sales pitchy because they can't even sell it if they wanted to.
Right.
But all it's doing is bringing people in their place and learning about what the company does. It's a great technique because if you are struggling with what to create, just think outside of your company.
Yes.
Because I don't think there's too many companies that actually could create podcasts just on their content alone and make it exciting.
Right.
But it's easy to constantly come up with cool topics to talk about.
Absolutely.
Make it conversational without a purpose.
Be creative.
Yeah.
Then the second point is it's a great use of your time, both from a business standpoint and a consumer standpoint. And then it's just the new kind of networking. So what are some reasons why people maybe should not do a podcast? Like, do you think everyone should do a podcast?
I think everyone should, yeah. But I don't think you should if you have no plan of schedule of people that start it because it's a cool thing to do. Won't have very much success with it because you have to have some sort of game plan. Not game plan of like ROI, game plan of how often am I going to actually do this? Because the thing about podcasts is you have to start building consistency for people to even listen to it.
Yep.
So if you randomly create a podcast once a month, it's just not going to do well because there's too many other things that get filtered in their thing and they're just forgetting who you are.
Yeah.
Doing it as much as possible is obviously a given. If you can do it once a week, great. If you can do more than that, great. There's people that do daily podcasts. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Realistically, that's not going to happen, but at least starting, a really good starting point is to create like 5 episodes before you even launch the first one.
Yep.
So you start to have a little bit of a pool.
Yep.
And then you got to really figure out, okay, how many episodes am I going to do a week or a month? And what does that look like from a production standpoint of what planning is involved to actually think about what we're going to talk about?
Yep.
And then who's going to be on it, and then the editing, and then the uploading, and then there's lots to it.
Yep.
Now, obviously, it's more simple if you use something like Anchor or something on your phone where it's just direct to it, but you have to be really good at podcasting or what you're talking about if you think that you're just going to randomly wing it all the time.
Yeah.
That's not easy for people to do.
Yeah, and your review or your listeners will know.
Yeah, if you've put no time whatsoever into it. Yeah, so I think it's important to have a plan. So I think you shouldn't do it if you are super pumped up about this episode. You're like, we need to start a podcast. Tomorrow you record and then you publish it. That's probably not going to last long.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you also shouldn't do it if you're in a corporate environment and you don't have the support to do it. Because they'll cripple you even if you love doing it, and then you're not going to have fun whatsoever or have any success with it. Because as soon as you start feeling like you're in a rhythm, they're going to be like, we're not getting any business from this.
Maybe they should do it themselves then.
Maybe.
For their own personal brand.
Yep, maybe. Yeah.
So pretty much you said essentially 3 things. So the first one is don't do it if you don't have a plan. You can't just wing this. The second thing is don't do it just because it's the popular thing to do, which kind of goes back to you have to have a plan. Yeah. And then the third thing is if you're not supported by whatever business or corporation that you're a part of.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Because I think that part probably is one of the most important. I think honestly,
if you don't have the support.
Yeah, because like I have empathy for the people that are fired up to record a podcast, but their company just will not let them do it. But if you have the support, then go for it. But
Yeah.
then look at those other points.
Yeah.
Create a plan. Figure out what it is. What's the long term? What would success look like a year from now if you did a podcast every week? Because knowing the support you have is the big piece.
Yeah.
Like, so if you say yes, well, yeah, I have support for it. They said I'm all in to do it. Okay. A year from now, what will they look at to determine whether you're going to continue it?
Okay.
Knowing that is super important.
Yep.
Because if they say a year from now, all we want is just consistency and we're not going to look at numbers, then you're in a gold mine. Yeah. That's like 1% of companies.
Yeah.
The other 99% are going to look at something a year from now or maybe a month from now and say it either got us no business, it's a waste of your time, we need you to do this, blah, 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 blah. You're going to run into obstacles. So I think the support side is huge, but really asking that type of question, like, okay, if you're going to let me do it, I know I need to stay consistent at it. I need to do it. I want to do it once a week, which means I'm going to have to spend this time. What are you going to evaluate whether or not I can continue or not? Because there's people that could do an amazing podcast and start, and then they stop, not because it's their fault, but because they're forced to. And then, like you said, a great point is if you don't have the support, then do it on your own time.
Yes.
And no one runs your time. But either way, I think everyone should do it if they can.
Yeah. I think it's such an important thing, asking yourself that question, literally in so many things in your life, of like, what would success look like to me a year from now?
Yeah, that's what we ask every client. Like,
yeah, and define that, because if you don't have a target, like, you don't even know what you're shooting for, so you're in trouble from the get-go. So having a definition of what success means for you from your podcast.
Yeah.
Isn't
and really for all content, but
totally.
Yeah, from a podcast, definitely. But that's what we talk with every client about now. We've started to realize, like, it's super important for me to know what you're judging success on.
Yes.
Because I judge success for our company, like, if you're putting out content in any form from a personal brand or from our brand, it's a success.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what comes from it because I know what comes from it in the long term because I've seen it work.
Yep.
Most companies don't think that way because most companies, the owner doesn't do it himself or herself to actually realize that you don't have to track every little detail.
Yeah.
But we started to really realize the importance of asking that with clients and for a podcast too, just like, what are you actually going to determine we're doing a good job or not on?
Right.
Because if we don't immediately know that, or more importantly, if a year's down the road and we did exactly what we said and this success was exactly what they said, but they're like, yeah, we just don't feel like it. And we're like, wait a second.
Yeah.
A year ago, I have the notes here. We talked about that the success was this, and we've gotten there. You've changed what success is because now your thing is raised or whatever it is. It's a really good point to ask people that question.
Absolutely. Write
so
it
that
down.
You can reference and go back and say, I've done exactly what you said would be successful, but because we've had more success than you thought, now you've raised the bar. That's not fair. So it's an interesting point to think about.
And if you love, like, I think if you love what you're talking about and you really care about it and you want to provide value, just, it's like kind of like I've been vlogging for 3 years. We've been vlogging for several years. And it's like, I never worried about the numbers and the views. And in this case, listens, let's say. It's like, if you care about that kind of thing and that's all you're in it for, then it's like not worth it. But if you care about providing value and really care about like being there for people and just showing up and constantly be consistent, like we talked about, I think that's success in and of itself. Like, you know what I mean? Like, of course we have to look at like bullet points of like, okay, a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever. But I think if you fall in love with just the process of consistently recording and consistently posting and consistently, you know, providing value for your audience, that right there is probably the best thing that you can do, because I feel like content in general should be just constantly happening for any business, for any personal brand, no matter what.
And sure, you can say that that's the success, but at the same time, if you work for somebody,
of course,
they're determining whether or not your hours actually go there.
Exactly.
So you could love it all you want and think you have the best podcast and create this and create that. If at the end of the day, you don't have the support for it, you're not doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
You're working for them.
Yeah.
So that's the hard part, is it's much more than just I love it.
Right.
If
unless
you're
you do
not
it yourself.
doing
unless you do it
If you're
yourself.
doing it yourself, you can have that.
I was even talking to my brother this morning because so his wife is a teacher. She's a reading specialist, and she's been thinking about somehow providing information for parents, or like, you know, and I was talking to her about podcast or YouTube or something that she can provide an extra resource for parents, because how many parents want to help their kids read or, whatever. And so even though it's not necessarily like she's not doing it through her school, like do it yourself. Just do it yourself.
Yeah,
it's true.
But that requires the other conversation we talked about, which is side hustle and time that you want to work after you already worked that you're not getting paid for, which a lot of people don't want to do.
Yep. Yeah. It's all about
I hear people all the time, like just all the time. They're like, I want to start a podcast, or I think I'm going to start a podcast, or I think I'm going to start a vlog, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, people are just talking all the time. And I'm like, just start doing it. Cause it's like, it's worth actually doing, because talking about it's not getting you anywhere or doing anything at all for you.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it goes with not having a plan. It's the same as if you don't plan to actually keep doing it, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's not worth it
at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you'll just fail miserably with podcasts.
Yep.
Because you'll be just one of the millions and millions and millions that are doing it, that you look in the last episode was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So stick with it, because it's definitely a long game type of thing, but it's so worth it. So thank you guys for spending some time with me.
Yeah.
Chatting about podcasting. It was fun. It's good to be back.
It is good to be back.
Great to be back.
Leave a review on iTunes if you like this podcast. It helps other people find it, which is awesome, because we love just talking and providing value. And also, we'd love to know what other things you would love to have us talk about, because the hardest part about not being able to connect with you visually only through audio is we don't really know necessarily who's listening unless you comment. So can you comment, tell us what you do, where you're from, where you're listening from, what type of things, topics, ideas would you like us to chat about? We would love to know other topics to dive more into. If there's any specific things that on any episode we dive into that you'd love to hear more about, we love knowing that. So make sure you let us know. Tell us who you are. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.